This is Gemara Menachos Daf Chaf Beis. And we're holding on Chaf Aleph of Beis. We're on the first very wide line on the bottom, and we just finished answering when the Kayhanim are allowed to use the salt. And we explained that since Yisraelim are allowed to use the salt midaraisa for their karbanos, it cannot be that the Kayhanim would need a special pasuk to teach that. It must be that they're also able to use it. And therefore, we ended that midrabanan when we said that the Kehanim, again, that's on the Daraisa level for Yisraelim. But there's a special Tanai Bezdin that we learned that midrabanan, the Kehanim are even able to use the salt for something. We concluded that it must be that it doesn't mean for their karbanos, excuse me, it does not mean it doesn't mean for their karbanos, but it means to use in eating their karbanis, meaning for their personal benefit when eating the karbanis. Frag the Gemara on this raya of Ravina of Ramorcha Ravashi. Hachi Kamar Rav Shisha Breid Ravidi. So said Rav Shisha. Lo nitzcha el ben Bukhri. The Tanai that we've been discussing, the Tanai that Kohanim are allowed to get benefit from the salt, is only needed for Ben Bukhri. Who's Ben Bukhri? As we'll see in a moment, he holds that Kehanim are not required to give the machzah shekel to the Bedek Habayis. The Tanana is learned to the Mishnah. Amar Rav Yehuda Heid Ben Bukhri b'Yavne. Ben Bukhri was made in Yavne. Kol kayin shekel einoi chayte. Any kayin who gives a machzah shekel is not a naveira, which seemingly implies, do they have to give the machzah shekel? Answer is absolutely not. Omar loy Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, says Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. Loy, no. Ki ella kol kayin sheino shekel chayte. He argues the kohanim have to give the machzah shekel, and if not, it's considered an avera. But says Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, ella shakanim darshan mikra zelatzvan. The kohanim darshaned from the following pasuk for themselves, for their own benefit, so that they didn't have to give the machzah shekel. 4 lines to the end of the Amud. What are they? Darshin chol minchas kayin kolil tia, and every mincha of the kayin has to be kolil, entirely burnt. Lo yisei achel, it should not be consumed. So the Kehanim learned from this pasuk that they didn't have to give machzah shekel, because if they did, then it would be partially, the karbanas would be theirs, and therefore, if all these karbanas sebers consider partially theirs, then how could they be in? But if the pasuk says that it has to be kolil, that the minchas koyanim has to be completely burnt. And yet we know, of course, these karbanos are eaten. So said the Koyanim, a drasha to themselves must be, we don't give machzis a shekel. So that was the machlokes, Rav Yechon ben Zakkai versus Rav Shisha Brei to Ravidi. And again, we're really driving towards the shita of Ben Bukhri, whom argued, on Rav Yechon ben Zakkai. So says the Gemara, before we get there, let's just understand the shitais. Ula ben Bukhri, kim the chatchila mechayev. According to Ben Bukhri, there's no chiyav, there's no obligation lechatchila to give the masa shekel la tuye, to bring it in the first place. Ki ma'isi nami chaytu. So if there's no chiyav to give the masa shekel for the Gemara, then if they were to actually give it, it should be an aveira. Why? Says classical yisaid when it comes to kachim, because if you don't need to give it, that means it's not kachim, it's chulin. You're not allowed to bring chulin azara. Responds the Gemara, Damaisi Masar Lahin Litzibur. What it means is they bring the machzah shekel and they give it over to the tzibur. You're allowed to donate, of course, whatever you want, and therefore it's not considered chulin le'azara. So says the Gemara, let's go into the din of Rav Shisha Breid Ravidi. Shisha Breid Ravidi said, the midrabanan, there is this Tanai Bezdin, that the Kohanim could get benefit from the melech, from the salt, and that we need it according to this shita of Ben Bukhri. So why? What does Ben Bukhri do for this? Says the Gemara, I would have thought as we turn over to Chav Beis Amud Aleph, according to Ben Bochri, I would have thought Ki Zachalu Rachmana Yisrael, that when did the Torah give a rishos, give an allowance to use the salt? I would have thought that it's only for Yisraelim. Why? Because they give them machzah shekel de'islu lilishka. Because they have a portion, since they give them machzah shekel, they have a chelik in everything. But the kahanim d'lasu le'eshcha lo yizachlu rachmana. I would have thought that the kahanim do not get the schos to use the salt. Why not? Because they didn't give machzah shekel. Kamash malan. So that's the chiddush. So says the Gemara that we need the special chiddush of utilizing the salt davka, according to the Shita of Ben Bochri, that the kayanim do not give the machzis ashekel. So says the Gemara, let's go a little bit deeper. Because yesterday within the machlekes we quoted that the eitzim that is used to burn the karbanos comes from Bedek Abayis, comes from the communal funds. Says the Gemara, the eitzim the pshitale latana. The eitzim that the Tana felt yesterday was pashit to be shal tzibur, that it comes from the tzibur. Minol, where do we know this from? Says the Gemara, the Tanya, we learned in a brayso. I would have thought if someone says, what does he do? He should bring wood from his house. Just like he has to bring the accompanying libations, the nisachim, from his house. To counter this, says the Torah, that what? Ma mizbeach mishal tzibor, just like the mizbeach, that which is burnt in it comes from the tzibor. Av eitzim veish mishal tzibor, Tivi Rav Lazar bar Rav Shimon. Rav Lazar ben Shamuah imer ma mizbeach shlo nishtamish b'hed. You know, I'll learn the drasha differently. Just like the mizbeach shlo nishtamish b'hed, that a hedi is not allowed to use it. That what? There's a din that a hedi cannot use before it is kadosh. So too, it has to be. It has to be that it came from something. So too, the eitzim, says the Gemara, has to come from something. Meaning that the yid does not bring it. So says the Gemara, my beinayu, seemingly both shitas are very similar. What's the chilik? Explains the Gemara. I'll tell you. Ika beinayu chadeti. The difference is going to be new wood. According to Rav Lazar ben Shamuah, according to the second shita, what's going to happen? The eitzim has to be new. It can't be used for anything else, and therefore, it has to be new wood. Whereas according to Rav Lazar ben Shimon, no, even if the wood was used prior, it's still allowed to be brought. Frakti Gemara, what? Vatiki loy. According to Rav Lazar ben Shamuah, old wood cannot be used for the mizbech. How could that be? Vaksiv, but in the pasuk, vayomer Ravina el David. Our Ravina said to David, "Yikach v'yal Adoni Hamelech hatoy ve'inav." You should take and you should bring up that which is good in his eyes. Rei Abakar, see the cattle la'ila v'amoyrigim uklei Abakar la'itzim, and the moyrigim and the klei abatar are the cattle gear for the wood. So what do we see? We see David HaMelech is about to settle and find an area for the Beis HaMikdash, and he's purchasing it from Aravina Ivusi. Aravina said his cattle can be used as karbanos, and the mayrigim, which are the different farming implements, the klei abakar, the different items used, can be used as firewood. And David takes it. So what do we see? We see clearly that even atiki, even old wood, could be used for the mizbeach. Responds the Gemara, no, achanam becharati. This is also referring to new wood that are Ravina had items that were never used. Says the Gemara, wrapping up this brayso, my marigim ula. You know what marigim is? A mita shel turbal, a turbal bed. Shkoyach, my mita shel turbal. What's that? Amar Rav Yehuda, you know what it is? Iza de korkisa. It's a goat-shaped weight on a spiked board. The dashu behu dashtoi, in which they use to thresh the grain, to beat the grain. Amar Rav Yosef, my Kara, where do we see this in a pasuk? Says the pasuk, Hine samticha lemoirag, charot chadash bal piyos, tadosh harim. I made a new sharp moirag with many sharp edges, and you thresh the mountains and you grind them. What do we see? We see moirag, as is moirigim, is used a sharp item that is used for the threshing of the grain. And now we move on to a new Mishnah, which is going to pivot off of the halachas that we've been discussing of the melech, of the salt. And it's going to go together into the dinim of kemitza. But not stam the dinim of kemitza. What happens if it mixes with another carbon, which of course should be reminiscent of the Gemara's in Zvachim that we learned of the different carbonates that get mixed together. So the first Mishnah that we'll be talking about is when the kaimitz gets mixed with another mincha, but both of them go on the mizbeach. So what do we do now? Says the Mishnah, Nisarev kumsa bekaimitz chaverta. If one kaimitz gets mixed with another, beminchas kayhanim, or if the kaimitz gets mixed with the minchas kayhanim, beminchas kayim mashiach, beminchas nisachim. All of these cases, what is the halacha? Ksheira. All of these cases, it is kosher. Since it says Rashi, why is it kosher? Let's learn one Rashi together. Says Rashi very simply, because all of these cases, the halacha is these are cases of kemitza that is completely burnt, and that's why it's going to be kosher. Rav Yehuda Imer b'minchas kain Mashiach b'minchas nisachim psula. Why? Shezu b'lilasa avav zu b'lilasa raka v'hein b'ililay zu mizu, and they're going to absorb one from another. They're prepared differently, and therefore their mixture cannot be brought on the mizbeach. So we have a machlekes, seemingly Rav Yehuda and the Tanakama. Tanakama said, I shouldn't say that. Yes, Tanakama said Minchas Kohen Mashiach, because the Maisa it's fully burnt, it's kosher. Rav Yehuda said no, because the Minchas Kohen Mashiach and the Minchas Nisachim, it's true that it's fully burnt, but because they're prepared differently. One is a thicker blilasei ava, one is a thinner blilasei raka. Therefore, we have to be concerned, and it will be possible. So says the Gemara, before we dive into the machlekes of Yudin and Chachamim here, let's go back a little bit down Chazara lane. Let's go back to the Gemara in Zvachim, that we had a similar machlekes, Rav Yehuda and the Tanakam over there, a Gemara in Zvachim Daf Ayin Zayin, that with karbanas they got mixed. Tonight also we learned in the Mishnah, 8 lines on the bottom, Chavez Amid Aleph, Tam Shenisari V'mayim, Tam Shenisari V'mayim. Some have a gear, so Dam V'mayim. Blood became mixed with water. Im Yesh V'maris Dam, if it looks like blood, Kosh. Nisari V'yayin, if the blood became mixed with red wine, we view the blood as if, we view the wine as if it was water, and therefore, if there's enough blood to give it the mara of dam, to give it the appearance of blood, then it will not be batal, and it will be allowed to be placed in the mizbech. Nisarev b'dam behema oy b'dam chaya. If the blood from the carbon became mixed with another blood of an animal which is not non-carbon, we view the chulin dam, the non-kachim dam, as if it was water. And again, the same side. If there's enough dam for it to give it the appearance, it can yes go on the mizbeach, and if not, the sheet of the Tanakama. Rav Yehuda Imer says Rav Yehuda, ein dam mevatel dam. Says Rav Yehuda, blood does not nullify blood. According to Rav Yehuda, min be'minoi einoi batal, and therefore, says Rav Yehuda, if even one dot of blood falls into a large amount of chulin dam, it's still going to be kosher for zrika. Why? Because it's never batal. That's the machlekes Tanakama and Rav Yehuda. Says Rav Yochanan, They both come from the same pasuk. Says the Torah of Lachabidam Abar Midam Asa'ir should take for the blood of the par and blood of the Sa'ir, and you put it on the Mizbeach HaPenimi. This is the Nisina, the Hazah, or the Zrika of this dam is after the two are mixed. Hadavar Yadua, says the Gemara. Shadam shal par merubi, dam shal Sa'ir. Of course, the dam of the par is more numerous than the dam of the Sa'ir. And yet, what does the Torah say? That it's considered a combination of both of them. So what do we see? We see that even though one in relation to the other is an insignificant amount, still it is not batal. So Rabbanan Savri, say the Rabbanan as we turn over to Chav Beizim and Beis. Mikan, what do we see from here? A massive din. Klab e bitol. Say the Chachamim Mikan. La'oilin shein mevatlin zeh. We see from over here that la'oilim, things that go up on the Mizbeach, are not batal, do not nullify one another. However, things that do not go on the Mizbeach would, yes, batal, mevatal one another. Divrei, that's the Chacham. Rav Yehuda Savar, Mikan lemin b'minoi, sheinai batal. Says Rav Yehuda, no. It's not a din in Kachim. Says Rav Yehuda, it's a din in min b'minoi. They're both blood. It's not batal. They're both blood, min b'minai, irregardless that it's a carbon. No, it's the fact that it's min b'minai, ain't batal. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan Savri, Mikan La'ilim Shein Mevatzal Zazeh. Is that really the aside for the Gemara before we even bring this back home to our Sugya? V'dilma Mishal Demin B'minayu. How do you know the Chachamim's reasoning is because La'ilim, that which goes in the Mizbeach, it's not Mevatzal Zazeh. Maybe it's like if you said, Min B'minai. Says the Gemara, Yashmin Min B'minai. If the pasuk had said this case about Min B'minai and not about Eilim, not about things of Mizbeach, like you said, and now that the pasuk is talking about a case of things that go on the Mizbeach, say the Chachamim, Misham Da'ilin, that has to be the reason. Says the Gemara, how do you know? Maybe you need both. Kasha. The Gemara ends off that the Shida Chacham is indeed a kasha. Rav Yehuda Savar. Mikal lemin b'mina sheina batel. Frakti Mar v'dom misham doilin. Who? Iash minan says Rav Yehuda Oilin. Min b'sheina mina kedika amrit. Bahashta ashmin min b'mina misham b'mina mina who? V'dil ma'arkan adika min b'mina v'oilin. Kasha. So Gemara really ends a fascinating Gemara. We don't have such a thing commonly. And the Rishonim over here go to town, as you see two massive Taisasin over here. But basically, both Shitas are not clear. Both Shitas, the Gemara is ending off with a kasha. It's not perfectly a good raya, whether it's a din dafka about Oilin or din dafka about min b'mina. Okay, but that's the Yisaidistik of Machlekes Rav Yehuda and the Chachamim, Klape, Karbonos, or min b'mina. Says the Gemara, let's bring this back home to our sugya. Tonight we learn to the Mishnah of Yudayim, Rabbi Minchas Gan, Minchas Gaim Hashem, Minchas Zachab Psula, Shazu Blas, Avlu Blila, say Raka. Vein Bailai Zumizu. Frak the Gemara, whoa, Bailais. Hey, Bailai Zumizu? My Ave, Min Beminai. We just said, what's the Yisayid of Rav Yehuda? Min Beminai na bottle. So why are you telling me it's because they're Bailais? They absorb one from another. That's not the reason. Answers the Gemara as we turn over to tomorrow's daf. Chav Gimel and Aleph. You know why? Amar Rava Kasavar Rav Yehuda. Now we'll get an understanding of how Rav Yehuda holds min b'minoi nebato. Kasavar Rav Yehuda kol shehu min b'minoi v'davar acher. Solek is minoi kemi she'enoi minoi Rava love umevatloi. That the way that it works, says Rava, that you know what Rav Yehuda holds. They only have a min b'minoi, which of course Rav Yehuda holds is not bottle. And now you have davar acher. So what you do is you get rid of the minoi. We view the min as if it's not there, and therefore einai minoi becomes more numerous, and it's going to be Mavatalai, of course, tremendous sugyas. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata Dishmaya.